If you're watching this video, I want you to do me a favor. Please get out a violin and start playing it because I am sick again. Now, the first time I got sick a couple of months ago, that was a viral infection. That was just kind of getting unlucky, I think. But this time, I'm pretty confident I have a cold. I'm aware that I need to do the PFL. That will get done tomorrow. In this video, I'm going to be predicting UFC Shanghai. And honestly, I don't really understand why there is so much hate about this card. I actually think this is a really good card. Now, it does lack a lot of name value, but I think the matchups on this card are going to provide a very high level of entertainment, if nothing else. Like, I do understand that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with a lot of fighters on this card, but there are fun fighters on this card, there are fun fights on this card. I think the main event and the co-main event are pretty fun. I mean, you could even swap them around, but they probably do want the hometown hero to be the guy in the main event, but this is a good card. I'm really looking forward to this card. It is broadcast at 3 AM Eastern time, so I guess now the European fans can have fights on at a normal time, and me in New Zealand, I can have fights on at like 10 PM. I think these are going to be broadcast on Saturday night for me. So that's kind of epic, to be honest, and kind of perfect actually, because I'm actually going to be at a friend's house at that time, so that's going to be very ideal. Now, I guess you don't watch these videos to hear me talk about my life. I am well aware that no one actually does give a shit, considering how often I mention university, and you guys all tell me you don't care, but I do think this is a good poster as well, to kind of change the conversation. I do like it when the UFC goes abroad, they go to somewhere new, and they do the poster in a style of kind of the area. Like, this looks like Shanghai, and they've got the fighters there. Like, I think that's sick. This is a good poster, one of the better posters I have seen. Of course, aside from that, there's Road to UFC on as well on Friday night, or Friday morning, I should say, for the Eastern timers. And then, of course, as well, there is the Contender Series this week and the PFL. So do please check out my channel, watch those videos for my predictions if you would like to see them, and subscribe if you would like some more, because I am so close to 10,000 subscribers, and I really would appreciate it if you guys did support me in that way. I do appreciate it a lot. UFC 314, was it UFC 319? I'm sick, guys, I'm sorry. My picks weren't that good, you know, it just was a bad kind of picks card for me. I feel like the analysis, like the breakdown, the theories behind the predictions were kind of spot on. I just got them wrong, except for the main event. Alright, I'll take an L on that. You know, I really did think that Dricus had some sort of wrestling in him, but he just doesn't. But that's fine. Sometimes you've got to learn these things the very, very hard way. Now let's get into the fights. I'm actually going to start with the UFC fights taking place the night before on the Road to UFC card. So the first UFC fight of the weekend is Nyamjargal Tumendemberel fighting against Terrance Saeturn. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth on this one because I did cover it on my Road to UFC prediction video, but I do think that Nyamjargal Tumendemberel does win this fight. But I think that Terrance Saeturn is pretty good. You know, he is a aggressive, pressure-forward wrestler for the most part. I do think he is quite small for the division, and I have seen opponents, most notably his last opponent, defend a lot of his takedowns, but he's got good 5-round cardio, and he can push a pace, and that is something that I have been critical about Tumendemberel in the past, is his cardio and his wrestling. However, I will admit, he looked significantly improved against Carlos Hernandez, especially over the performance he had against Topnoi Karam a couple of years ago. I think Tumendemberel has a lot of power for 125 pounds, a relatively rare skill set for this weight class, and I think that Saeturn is quite hittable on the feet, so I'm going to go with Tumendemberel to win by knockout in this matchup, but I do like the fight. The next one is women's strawweight. We've got Ming fighting against Bruna, Brazil. I actually am picking Bruna, Brazil to win a decision in this matchup over Ming. I think that she just is the better striker. Now, I know that Ming's coming off a massive KO win over Feng Shuakan, and that was a situation which made her go viral because she is actually a doctor as well as an MMA fighter. Quite exciting, to be fair. But I do just kind of think she lacks a lot of size and overall skill set to really make a run in the division. And despite my opinion on Bruna Brazil's skill set being quite low, to be honest with you, I do think that Bruna Brazil is talented enough to maintain distance over Ming and just kind of kickbox her way to a 3-round decision. So those are my UFC predictions for the Road to UFC matchups happening the day before this card will be broadcast. Now, the first fight, according to the Tapology order on the actual UFC broadcast, is Diyar Nurgozhay versus Uran Satybaldiev. And I'm picking Diyar Nurgozhay to win the fight, guys. I know he's a big underdog, and I know he looked like probably the worst fighter to ever step into the octagon ever. And I had a lot of money on him as well at that time because I was sports betting at that time. And Nurgozhay, he hurt my feelings. He was in the safety parlay from Angelo from We Want Picks as well. And he just he shit the bed. Let's be honest. He looked terrible. And I think a lot of it could come down to that tick that he has. He's always wiping his face when he's striking. It's the most frustrating thing ever. But the thing about Uran Satybaldiev is I don't really rate him. Like, yes, he did lose to Martin Boudet on short notice. That's fine, upper weight class. But prior to these matchups, man, like, he just doesn't really look like he has anything to offer aside from wrestling at all. And Nurgozhay has decent enough defensive wrestling, in my opinion, to at least defend the takedowns against Satybaldiev. And he should be the better striker out of the two guys here. So we are starting off the night with a very big underdog pick in Nurgozhay to win by decision, maybe by knockout. And now Xiao Long is going to be fighting against Yu Sung Yu, and I do believe that Yu Sung Yu is, I think I'm saying his name incorrectly. I'm just going to pronounce it in this direction. I'm sorry. I think that Yu is really good. I know that his performance against AJ Cunningham was boring, but he did show very, very elite wrestling and control over a guy that is absolutely massive for the weight class. And not only that, is a guy that does train with Bryce Mitchell daily. And you can just kind of tell that he did have very good wrestling and control in that matchup. He was able to put AJ Cunningham in a lot of very bad positions, despite not being able to find a finish. And honestly, I don't think that he finds a finish in this matchup either. Now, Xiao Long is a fighter that does confuse me a lot, because he is a grappler. At least that's how I view his skill set, is as a grappler. Most of his wins are by sub or decision. And he went out there against Shohei Nozei and fought to a very, very close submission grappling battle. And then, of course, apart from that, he had to deal with a couple of very tough wrestlers. Then he goes out there against Quang Lei, and he just brawls it out with him on the feet for 3 rounds. I could not believe what I was seeing. This was so unexpected to me. So I think that Xiao Long has kind of shown a much, much more improved skill set in the striking department recently. And he does have a good BJJ to threaten Yu Sung Yu if he is going to... I'm not even saying his name correctly in any way whatsoever. Jiu-Jitsu's, sorry, on the ground. But I think that Jiu-Jitsu wins a decision by wrestling. We're just going to ignore that lapse in judgment there due to my illness. I'm going to blame it on. We move up to Yizha taking on Westin Wilson. I think Yizha wins this fight. I'm confident Yizha wins this fight. I'm not 1500 minus confidence that Yizha wins this fight, though. Like, this is insane odds. Like, I know that Westin Wilson doesn't really have like a fantastic skill set. I'm just going to put it honestly with you. But he's still dangerous on the ground. And he did show that against, of course, the GOAT, Jeka Saragi. But the way that Westin Wilson fights is he has a Wonder Boy kickboxing style, but just with no head movement and not really any striking ability whatsoever. But he does have dangerous BJJ. Like, even in the fight against Joanderson Brito, he did get dominated the entire time, but he was still, like, trying to roll for some subs and moments while being half unconscious. And then against Gene Silva, I mean, he just got smoked by Gene Silva, but you can even go to his regional scene fights and see his knockout losses as well. I think it was this matchup here against Teruto Ishihara. Honestly, Teruto Ishihara is a Uriah Faber's A1 Combat legend. He was on the first ever Uriah Faber's A1 Combat event that was broadcast on UFC Fight Pass, and he got a win after a big losing streak. So shout out to Teruto Ishihara. But yes, he got knocked out in one punch by him. Not really a good look. As long as he's on the feet, he's a victim. Yizha hasn't really shown like one punch knockout ability, but he's also a grappler, and for that reason, that is why I do have some hesitance in this matchup, like with the odds. Yes, I think Yizha wins. Yes, I think he should be a big favorite, but not this big. I think Yizha wins the fight. He probably wins the fight by knockout. But honestly, if Westin Wilson just flukes a sub, it would be kind of funny, but I don't think that's going to happen. And now Michel Pereira takes on Kyle Daukaus. Now, Michel Pereira, the 185-pound experiment was going really well for him at one point. He came up from 170 after missing weight, and he was demolishing guys at 185 pounds. and looking really good doing it. And the win over Michel Oleksiejczuk so quickly has aged quite well because Oleksiejczuk's on a win streak now. But then he took on Anthony Hernandez, nightmare matchup. In hindsight, how stupid of it was me to pick Michel Pereira in that matchup, right? But he nearly finished Hernandez in the first 90 seconds of the fight, and then he gassed out 90 seconds in. And then against Abus Magomedov, similar sort of situation, but I do think Abus Magomedov is a pretty skilled all-around fighter. Daukaus is taking this fight on short notice. Of course, he was in the UFC in the past. He did get released from the promotion after a few losses, and then since then he has gone on a bit of a win streak, recaptured his bout for Cage Fury FC, a bout that he held in 2020 before signing to the UFC initially, and he has looked decent in those performances, but I don't think that he's looked so good that I can be convinced that he's going to be able to beat Michel Pereira. Now, I know that Michel Pereira has all of his flaws in the world, but the Daukaus brothers are Daukaus brothers. They don't know how to box that well, and Kyle Daukaus, out of the two Daukaus brothers, was kind of like the worst Daukaus brother out of the two. So that does concern me. However, Daukaus does have a path to victory here, and that would be with the wrestling and the grappling. But I think that this is a big enough step down in competition for Michel Pereira, so that he should be able to step down and get a finish relatively early on into the fight and kind of exploit that lack of striking defense of Kyle Daukaus. And the next fight on the card is Rongzhu taking on Austin Hubbard, and Rongzhu is a very, very popular pick today, and I do think that I agree. I think that Rongzhu has shown very good improvement since actually moving his training camp over to City Kickboxing, a gym that is quite well renowned for turning strikers into very good takedown defense guys. Does that make any sense? The moral of the story is he moved to CKB recently, had one camp with them, and he threw down with Cody Steele, chucked off the initial takedowns of Cody Steele, and kind of forced Cody Steele to strike with him, and forced Cody Steele to throw down with him in that matchup. And I was very, very high on Cody Steele coming into the UFC, so that Rongzhu performance does mean a lot for me watching him. And not only that, he has beaten Shin Haraguchi, who is very, very small for the weight class, but also a former junior freestyle wrestling world champion as well, which was very impressive. The loss to Chris Padilla, it is what it is in my opinion, but Rongzhu, in my opinion, has shown good enough takedown defense and good enough striking to be able to deal with someone that, like, Austin Hubbard's skill set has. Austin Hubbard, he is a big guy for the weight class. Now, he is 5'10", but he's also a pretty wide sort of build for 155 pounds, in my opinion. But the thing about Austin Hubbard that has always kind of been his main concern and his main drawback is his speed. I do think he's quite slow for 155 pounds. Like, a lot of these guys at lightweight do have very, very elite talents. And I think that Rongzhu hasn't necessarily fully showcased that consistently, but I think that Rongzhu has shown a skill set that he's faster and the better striker out of the two against Hubbard in this matchup. Hubbard wants to win this fight. He's going to need to get the takedowns. And Hubbard isn't really a guy that's just shooting for takedowns over and over and over and over again, which I think is probably what's going to be needed to defeat Rongzhu in this fight. So my theory is I think that Rongzhu defends a lot of takedowns of Hubbard, and it kind of looks like this Cody Steele matchup where Rongzhu and Hubbard are striking it out, and Rongzhu is the better striker. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cough in a moment, and this is a really, really good fight, because I'm picking another underdog, guys. I am picking Charles Johnson in this matchup against Lana Kavanagh. I like Lana Kavanagh a lot. In fact, a lot of people in Lana Kavanagh's camp actually do follow me on Instagram and were contacting me around the period of time of his Contender Series fight. So there probably is a chance they're watching this, and they're probably just going to hate me forever now, and I am sorry. But this is a fight which we either find out that Lana Kavanagh is the real deal, or we see that the Charles Johnson of old is back. And honestly, I would probably prefer for the division, the state of the division, that Lana Kavanagh wins the fight. But I think that from what I've seen, I do like Johnson as a dog in the spot. Johnson's a guy that's fought tough guys. He's beaten tough guys. The one loss he's had recently, Timarov actually failed a drug test, if I'm not mistaken, after this matchup. So that's a bad look for Timarov, not a terrible look for Johnson, in my opinion. And before that, he was on a win streak, and he has been very, very active in his career. I beat Sumudaerji, who's on this card, and ranked Joshua Van. In my opinion, I thought he was up 2 rounds against Van going into the third, despite what the commentary is going to try and tell you. And Van is now going to fight for the title, most likely, against Pantoja. And, just good wins overall prior to that. Lana Kavanagh, the main sort of fight for me that I really wanted to look at was the fight against Jose Ochoa, because I think that this win has aged very well. Like, I know that Ochoa did lose after this fight, but Ochoa's looked like a real prospect himself and a very good fighter in his own right, and Kavanagh and him had a very close decision in that matchup. And Ochoa is a very lengthy Muay Thai guy. Who else is a lengthy Muay Thai guy? Charles Johnson. He's a guy that won the trials, I guess you would call it, to get the scholarship for Tiger Muay Thai back in the day. He's got a very good wrestling background. And I think that's going to be the key to defeating Lana Kavanagh here. Like, I know that Lana Kavanagh's grappling and wrestling is improving, but I think that that is still something that's a little bit of an unknown. He's very small for the weight class, in my opinion, compared to Johnson. And Johnson's a guy that's given a lot of people trouble in the wrestling in the past. And I know that Johnson doesn't really go out there and shoot takedowns very often. I think that you can kind of recognize Kavanagh's skill set as being a very fast-handed boxer and sort of see that a good path to victory to beat him would be to take him down. So I'm going to go with Johnson here to mix in his rangy Muay Thai striking as well as his wrestling to take down Kavanagh and win a very, very close decision in this fight. Alright, I'm sorry, I'm probably going to have to speed up the predictions at this point because all this talking is not good. But Taiyilake Nueraji now fights against Kiefer Crosby. This is one of those fights I mentioned in the intro, which I think is going to be really good, but not much name value, because of course Kiefer Crosby, 0-2 in the UFC, was probably only really signed for the short notice opportunity he got against Kevin Drusay in Australia at that time. And Taiyilake Nueraji is a guy that UFC have been aware of for a while, especially at least since his road to UFC matchup. Where was it? Here against Han-Seol Kim, which he won by brutal face plant elbow KO in the second round. And that was a fantastic fight. Like, that was a fight of the night on a UFC Fight Night type of fight. It was a banger. I recommend you watch it. I also recommend you watch this one against Ki Wang. This one's actually also on a UFC Fight Pass as well. Very good fighter. I do recommend you watch. And also another fun fight was his win over Maxim Shlemenko, which he was also a very aggressive fighter in as well. So the point about Taiyilake Nueraji is I don't think that his skill sets are like elite, but he is so fun to watch because he will just come forward, he will throw volume, he'll bomb away, no defense, no defense at all. I don't think he's ever heard of defense because most of the time he decides to block punches with his face. This was very showcased in the Ki Wang fight and also against Han-Seol Kim as well, but Kim just wasn't really as good as I thought he could have been at one point. I was actually quite impressed by Kim. I think it was in the first ever season of Road to UFC. He got a pretty good win over a guy from, I think it was the Philippines, and I was like, oh, Han-Seol Kim's quite good. And then Taiyilake Nueraji come along. But Nueraji is a guy that I think could struggle against better fighters than Kiefer Crosby. But with that being said, I could genuinely see, and I do mean it when I say this, I could genuinely see Crosby potentially knock him out. Because the thing about Crosby that he's been exposed for in the UFC is just no grappling ability, really, like, at all. You know, as soon as Kevin Drusay got a takedown, Kiefer Crosby put both hands on the ground and gave Kevin Drusay the rear naked choke. In fact, when people do that, I call it the Kiefer Crosby, because he originated the no rear naked choke defense. And then Sam Patterson subbed him immediately, pretty much after getting him down to the ground. So Kiefer Crosby's mostly been exposed for a lack of grappling. But Taiyilake Nueraji doesn't really wrestle that much. Like, I know he did get a sub over Maxim Shlemenko, but he's just coming forward and bombing away. And he's having a lot of fun doing it. And he's putting on fight of the night performances every single time. This probably will be the fight of the night, in my opinion. But Taiyilake Nueraji's the pick. I think he does knock out Kiefer Crosby in this fight. But genuinely, Crosby's like boxing fundamentals are quite good. Like, the thing about him, though, that I do worry about in this fight is it seems like most of his power and most of his best strikes are in close range. Like, the hooks, really. And Nueraji throws a lot of straight shots, and he fights from range a lot. Despite not really defending takedowns in any way whatsoever, defending strikes in any way whatsoever, I do think that Nueraji should go out there and avoid a big shot and get a knockout of his own. I think he's going to be a fun fighter in the UFC, even if his ceiling isn't that high. Sumudaerji fights against Kevin Borjas. Kevin Borjas, probably the most popular underdog on the card. I just don't agree with it, man. Like, I kind of think I've dug myself so deep into the hole at this point that I just can't get out of it. Because as soon as Kevin Borjas won on the Contender Series, I thought to myself, man, I just do not rate this guy at all. And then he just kept losing, and I just kept thinking to myself, Kevin Borjas, man, he's not good. And then against Ronaldo Rodriguez, like, despite, I'm going to call him Luis Rodriguez, because that was what he used to be called. Despite Luis Rodriguez probably being the most fraudulent fighter in UFC history, Borjas looked good. Like, his boxing genuinely looked good. It was incredibly sloppy a couple of years ago, but you can tell that he's tightened up that boxing, and his technique is significantly better than it used to be. But even with that being said, I think that maybe I overrate Sumudaerji. That could be what it is, because I actually do think that Sumudaerji's skill set is quite effective for this weight class. He's quite tall for 125 pounds, and I think that he does use the range quite effectively. He fights from range well, he throws a lot of straight shots, a lot of kicks up the middle, and for the most part, he does just want to maintain that range, and on top of that, I think he hits relatively hard. Like, he did lose to Matt Schnell in this war. It was a lot longer ago than I remember it being. Time has flown, but he was beating the crap out of Matt Schnell in that fight. And I know he didn't get the knockout over Matt Schnell, which is terrifying for the power that I did just mention. He still did beat Matt Schnell. And then after that, of course, he beat Mitch Raposo in what was a close fight, but I thought it was kind of showcased by Sumudaerji. And he showed good takedown defense to the point that Kevin Borjas ain't going to shoot a takedown. But if he does, Sumudaerji's going to defend it. I think this is a good matchup for Sumudaerji, just kind of based on the fact that Borjas is a boxer for the most part. He's a bit shorter, he's got a shorter reach, he's going to need to close the distance, and Sumudaerji's game plan is going to be to pick this guy apart from range, and I think he does. So that's my pick. I'm picking Sumudaerji against the very popular dog in Borjas. And another popular dog is Waldo Cortes-Acosta. I'm not prepared to jump off the Sergei Pavlovich hype train, guys. Like, he lost. What happened? He lost to Tom Aspinall, and then he fought against a guy he didn't even want to fight in the first place, and now all of a sudden we're just completely discarding what he did a couple of years ago to these guys. And I know that his performance against Rosenstrike was a steering contest, and you know, he did shoot takedowns in that fight and get some control off, which I think is something that you could kind of use to justify a Pavlovich pick again, but I'm seeing a lot of people picking Waldo Cortes-Acosta in this fight, and I personally just don't really see it. Now, yes, I did pick Sergei Spivak to beat Waldo, and that is a very good win, in my opinion. That's actually a pretty tough matchup for Waldo, and he went out there and he looked good. But I think that Pavlovich genuinely can defend any takedowns that Cortes-Acosta is probably going to attempt. And I think that Pavlovich as well, he's got the power to knock out Acosta at any moment. Now, here's the problem, though. And this is my theory. Like, this is me putting on a tinfoil hat on my bald head. I think what happened is Pavlovich went out there against Tom Aspinall, and he got caught charging in like he used to always do, because this is Pavlovich's style, or at least it was. Pavlovich would come forward, and he would just throw strikes. And because he's got an 84-inch reach, he would be throwing these strikes, and his opponents couldn't hit him. So he could afford to be aggressive. But then he took on a guy with legitimate talent in Aspinall, and he got caught. And then he's just been really, like, patient since then. He's not really wanted to get into the fire, which is a shame, because Pavlovich was such a fun fighter, you know? He was a guy that, you know, could have potentially beaten Aspinall for the belt at one point. Well, I mean, he fought Aspinall, right? So yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe we have lost that side of Pavlovich. Maybe Pavlovich just will never be the same guy again due to that knockout loss. And, you know, it does happen. It hasn't really happened in recent history from memory, but it is something that we've seen before. But I still got to trust in Pavlovich. I think if Pavlovich has any ounce of that old Pav, any ounce of that old aggression, he should go out there against Waldo and hit Waldo pretty hard. I know Waldo's got a good chin. He's hitting some big shots. But I think that Pavlovich can go out there and knock him out. So I'm going to go Pavlovich, picking Pavlovich by knockout. Now we've got a 5-round co-main event for Brian Ortega versus Aljamain Sterling. I think that Aljamain Sterling can exploit Brian Ortega's biggest weakness, in my opinion, and not get paid for it. Would that even be the right way to say it? The point is, Brian Ortega doesn't defend takedowns, and Aljamain Sterling shoots takedowns. And I think that Aljamain Sterling's going to go out there against Brian Ortega and control Brian Ortega for great durations in a 5-round fight. And as long as the fight's on the feet, despite Ortega's striking actually improving a lot recently, at least in my opinion, I think it's improved a lot. I don't know if anyone else really agrees, but I think Sterling's also going to be the more unorthodox striker. Now, Sterling's never really been renowned as like a fantastic striker, like a great striker, but he is awkward enough to give very good strikers problems. And his wrestling has kind of been the key to success for him at 145 pounds. He took on Keita, dominated him in the wrestling at UFC 300. That was a boring fight, the worst fight on the card. And he got out-muscled, out-wrestled by Evloev. You know, not too much shame in that, in my opinion. Ortega, in his last fight, of course, he did take on the great Diego Lopez. And I feel like Lopez actually, ironically, despite Lopez not really being this sort of style of fighter, actually sort of wrote the blueprint on how to beat Ortega for Sterling, and that is to get takedowns and get control. Lopez, I just expected to go out there and knock out Ortega, but Ortega's striking, as I said, did look improved in that fight. It's a 5-round fight. I think a 5-round fight favors Sterling. He's been in more of them, and I think that his cardio is probably better out of the two as well. Ortega's best chance is to get a sub off his back, but in modern MMA, we really aren't seeing that many defensive submissions anymore at the high level. Now, you do still see them, but I feel like to get a submission over an opponent that's not like a rear naked choke, you have to kind of show like an elite level of BJJ to be able to lock that up. Like, we're not seeing arm bars very often anymore in the UFC at the high level. We're not really seeing triangle chokes from bottom, or arm triangle chokes from bottom, or kind of stuff like that. Like, we're seeing a lot of arm triangle chokes from mount. We're seeing some guillotines, but not really many. And we are seeing a lot of rear naked chokes. It is the very obviously popular way to finish the fight these days. But yeah, I think that Sterling wins the decision. I don't really know why I went on that weird BJJ rant. But we move up to the main event. I think Ming Zhang knocks him out. You know, it's a massive step up in competition. You know, he just took on the retiring Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith went out probably the most Anthony Smith way he could possibly go out. Like a summary of his career. Smith is getting beaten up. He gives up. He gets on his knees. And then he quits. So the ref has to step in without like him quitting. So like he can kind of say, oh, the ref stopped the fight instead of I quit in the fight. That is the most Anthony Smith performance we've ever seen. And shout out to Zhang for exploiting that sort of side of Smith, really, I guess. Before that, he knocked out Ozzy Diaz. Doesn't really mean that much to me. I thought Ozzy Diaz looked bad against Jordan Santos at 185. Brenton Ribeiro, well-aging win, but once again, I don't think Brenton Ribeiro is that good, and Ribeiro hit him a few times. And before that, of course, you know, he's just fighting on the regional scene and taking on Tuco Tokos. And fighting absolute cans on the regional scene as well. There's not that many Chinese people at light heavyweight, but I do digress. Johnny Walker, he has a good chance in this fight, but I just don't really see him being able to go out there against Ming Zhang and beat him in the way that he beat Thiago Santos. And I know that's a very odd sort of fight to go back to because it was a fight. He didn't beat Thiago Santos, sorry. The way I'm thinking of this fight is against Thiago Santos. He was able to strike from range against Santos and eat a lot of big shots without getting knocked out in the fight. That's kind of what I was trying to say. I do apologize. But I just don't think that he can anymore. He got knocked out by Oezdemir. He got knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev. You know, I mean, he was on his way to potentially beating Ankalaev in that fight, to be fair to him. But, like, the fight against Smith was bad. Like, he just kind of striked with him from range and looked terrible doing it, really. And that was the fight which Anthony Smith said, "You're attacking my family," which is funny because he hasn't actually won a fight since then. But anyways, Ming Zhang's a boxer. He's an aggressive boxer. He's going to come forward. He's going to throw down. He's going to point at the canvas. He's going to throw 1-2s. I don't really know how else to break down the fight. Do I think that Ming Zhang should be a minus 400 favorite? Based on the fact that Ming Zhang is not fought this level of competition at all, I would say probably not. But I still think that Zhang's going to go out there and knock out Walker. Walker's chin has been dust for years. We were talking about how his chin was dust in 2021 when I first started my YouTube channel. And we're still talking about how dusty his chin is. And I think that he's going to get dusted. Just to shout out UFC Gambling Addicts by Ming Zhang in this fight, or Zhang Ming Yang. But yeah, I think he knocks him out. I think it's a fun fight though. I like this fight a lot. I apologize, I've lost a lot of energy towards the end of the video just because I'm not feeling 100%. But I think this is a good card. Let me know what you think in the comments below.